see if we can get this. There we go. All right. So we're going to go through several topics today. They're all cyber related. First, we'll talk generally about cybercrime trends and some ways that you can keep yourself more secure in your online life. Then we'll take a deeper dive into real estate specific wire fraud and give you some recommended practices to help prevent wire fraud and keep your clients' money and your clients safe. Then finally, we'll look at ADA website accessibility, which has been on NAR's radar for several years and has now gathered a lot more attention in the real estate industry, and we'll talk about why that is. As Bernadette said, please put your questions in the chat, and I will stop at the end of the cyber section and again at the end of the ADA section to answer questions related to those topics. All right, let's first dive into cybersecurity and wire fraud. Now, this all started, remember way back when, maybe when you had, you first started getting online and you got this email from a long lost African prince, who wanted to just, he had something to sell you, or he just needed some help. He had this great opportunity if you could just send him some money. Well, little did we know back then that was really just the starting point for cybercrime and everything that we're engaging in today and having done today through cyber fraud. And back then we thought, wow, we're kind of special. And a few people fell for it, and that was just the beginning of this onslaught that we've seen from cyber hackers all over the world. So let's look at cybercrime by the numbers. This number, 1.7 million, represents the number of internet scam complaints that were filed in just 5 years, from 2015 to 2019, according to the Internet Crime Complaint Center, or IC3, which is the internet crime arm of the FBI. And about a third of that 5-year total, or 3.5 billion, came in 2019 alone. So that 5-year total is $10.2 billion have been stolen from victims through various cybercrime schemes. Now, these are just the reported cases. I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about the cybercrime statistics from the FBI's IC3. These are just people who came forward. The actual numbers are probably a lot higher than this. People simply, maybe they don't know they've been victims of a fraud, or perhaps they never report it at all. And this may also not include fraud that was reported directly to FBI field offices and not submitted through the IC3. So as I said, about a third, or 3.5 billion, of those losses came in 2019 alone. The IC3 receives an average of 1,200 complaints per day since it was formed in 2000, and more than 4.8 million complaints have been filed. Cybercrime clearly is not going away anytime soon. So let's drill down to Connecticut and see how your state is doing. So here we see that Connecticut ranks 26 out of 50, so not terrible. For 2019, you're right in the middle of the pack with 4,412 victims. But as you can see, your neighbors in New York are among the highest, among the top 10. Now let's look at the numbers. Those 4,412 victims had over $33 million stolen from them, making Connecticut number 22 out of 50 states. But again, look at your neighbors and the surrounding states, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey down to your south, even Pennsylvania, a couple states over. The Northeast is one of the hotbeds of cybercrime, so please keep that in mind as we go through today's presentation. Your state, as I said, kind of in the middle of the pack, but the surrounding area is definitely a hotbed of cybercrime activity. So here are the top 5 categories that are tracked by IC3. Now, IC3 tracks more than 33 types of cyber fraud. These are the top 5 to keep in mind, because You know what? Awareness is key when it comes to cybercrime. The more aware you are as to what's going on out there, the better you can be prepared and the better steps that you can take to keep yourself, your clients, and your agents safe. All right, first is email compromise. Now, this could be either email, business email, or more personal email account compromise. And this targets businesses when it's business email compromise who regularly perform wire transfer payments. Does that sound a little bit like the real estate industry? Yes, it absolutely does. Or really any type of online payments that you're making or wire transfers that you're making, you could be a target for email compromise. And here's another thing to keep in mind. A lot of people think, well, this is just the big companies with multi-million-dollar payrolls, and those are the ones that are being targeted. And absolutely not. Small businesses are also targeted by email compromise. So that's business email. Email account compromise is similar, but it targets individuals. It's very sophisticated, and it either comes through social engineering or computer intrusion techniques where they literally break into your computer. You know that link you clicked that didn't seem to go anywhere? It may have installed spyware or malware on your computer that allowed a hacker to take control of your computer and your email program. The second highest ranking is confidence and romance fraud. Now, you might think this has to do with online dating and meeting someone online and you get to know them and then, oh, can I have $5,000 for a car repair or a surgery? No, it actually is also related to any kind of confidence scheme that is launched online. It makes the victim believe that the perpetrator and the victim have some sort of relationship. Maybe you've heard of the grandparent scam, where a child or a teenager or a young adult reaches out to grandma or grandpa and says, hey, mom and dad don't know, but I'm backpacking in Europe and I got robbed. I don't want to tell my mom and dad. Can you please just send me some money? Well, guess what? The hacker's done their research on the grandchild's social media, followed them. They know exactly where they are, who they're hanging out with, where they had dinner the night before, what country they're in, and they know you. They go to your social media pages, put two and two together that you're the grandparent. They make it seem very realistic that it is in fact your grandchild or your business partner or someone you knew in college. They make it very clear, seemingly clear, that this is the person, and lo and behold, send some money. So that's a confidence scam. Next is spoofing. So spoofing is where contact information such as a phone number or an email or a website is deliberately falsified to mislead and appear to be from a legitimate source. So they swipe a logo from a company and make it look pretty close. Maybe there's one letter off, but it's not enough to really notice that it's, when you're looking at it, just taking a quick glance, it seems like it's PayPal. It seems like it's, Apple or whatever. But it is not from a legitimate source. It is a hacker attempting to steal your information. So forged websites are used to mislead and gather that personal information. Now, spoofing can also occur with other types of crime, such as that email account compromise, creating an email address that looks a lot like the title company's email address, right? But it's not exactly right. So the next type are investment scams. That's the fourth highest type of cybercrime that's out there, which induces investors to make purchases on the basis of false information. Now, this usually involves victims, they promise victims large returns with minimal risk. So that should be a red flag if you get an email like that or get approached for that type of a scam. Variations of this scam include things like Ponzi schemes and pyramid schemes. Now, here's what I really want you to take note of. Real estate is number 5 out of 33 kinds of categories of cyber fraud. You're right up there, number 5. Hackers are targeting your transactions and your industry. Let's look at a couple of cases that really drive home what courts are looking at and where liability can lie with cybercrime. So in the case of O'Neill, Bragg and Staff versus Bank of America, a law firm sued to recover money from its bank, which the hacker stole from the law firm's bank account in the amount of $580,000. So a partner went ahead and wired the money to a bank in China after the hacker successfully impersonated another partner of the law firm. The email sounded legitimate. The verbiage was not strange. Remember that long lost Prince's original email, like not grammatically correct, right? The hackers have gotten much more sophisticated, and the verbiage and language they use sounds like it's from a legitimate source. So in this case, one partner believed that the email he was reading was from a partner in his law firm. It mentioned a client's name. It mentioned the correct account, the type of transaction, and the case sounded correct. These were absolute facts. But it turns out that it was indeed a hacker, and it was not the client's bank account. It was the hacker's account in China. Now, the law firm soon realized that it had been a victim of fraud and contacted its bank to stop the wire. The bank refused to stop the wire and said, "Let it go through, and then challenge it, and we'll try to get it back." Well, that didn't happen, and so the law firm sued the bank. Now, this court found that the bank is not an agent of the law firm and owed no special or fiduciary duty to stop a fraudulent wire transfer. So please bear this particular case in mind. At the end of this, I'll give you a resource that can actually help intercede with the bank and perhaps get some recovery. But bear in mind that some courts may find that a bank has absolutely no duty to stop that fraudulent transfer. So the sooner you can recognize the fraud, the better. All right, this next case involves two Ford dealers who routinely did business with each other. So in this particular case, one Ford dealer agreed to purchase 20 Ford Explorers from the other Ford dealer for about $736,000. When the time came to close the deal, the Ford dealer who was sending the Explorers sent an email, supposedly sent an email, and asked the receiving Ford dealer to go ahead and pay for the Ford Explorers. Sounds about right, right? But there was a problem. A hacker had infiltrated the Ford dealer's email account and sent fraudulent wiring instructions. Now, the Ford dealer that was supposed to pay the $736,000 had, it seemed legitimate. They'd done this type of deal before. They had done this wire transfer before. However, he noticed it was a different bank and he did nothing about it. So in this particular case, the court looked at who bears the risk of loss. So this may be a concept that you're familiar with in terms of, shifting the risk of loss during escrow. It's the same thing in this type of commercial transaction. So the court said, look, the person who was in the best position to stop the fraud was the party who would bear the risk of loss. So in this particular case, because the individual realized, hey, this isn't the bank we've sent money to before when we've done this type of deal. Why, they didn't pick up the phone. They didn't call the person on the other end. Now, I do want to point out, let's throw in a little risk management tip here. On these types of emails, if you do receive an email asking for, like in this case, it seems legitimate, you've done business before, do not reply and say, hey, I got this, you changed banks, is this correct? Because you'd be emailing the hacker back, right? Pick up the phone. Remember those things called phones. Pick up the phone, call the person, have that conversation, verify before you send the wire, even if it seems legitimate. But in this case, it would have saved $736,000. Talk about, an expensive phone call that was never made, right? To just pick up the phone and call to verify. So again, in this case, the person who has that is in the best position to prevent the fraud will be responsible for the risk of loss. All right, so here are some more tips. What to know about cybercrime. Please, please, please stop before you click. Common sense is your friend, my friend. Just hover your mouse over the sender's email address. If you do that, and it's supposed to be from Debbie@titlecompany.com, and it's from a long alphabet and numerical email string, a name and domain that you don't recognize, it's not Debbie@titlecompany. You can also hover your mouse, do not click, but hover your mouse over the link to actually see the destination. If it's not support@paypal.com, and this email is supposed to be from PayPal accounts, I've gotten these emails, your account is frozen, we need you to change your password, please click here to do so. It's not from PayPal, and even the destination website might look like PayPal. That's an example of spoofing. But you can hover your link over that and see where it actually goes. Another tip that I learned is you can actually copy, again, don't click, but copy that link. And there are detection sites out there. I've listed a few here on the slide that you can actually input that link and it'll tell you if it's a real website or not. So it verifies the link and verifies the website. So that's another thing you can do. The third thing, as I mentioned with that Ford Explorer case, just call the sender to verify. Don't click the link. Don't use the phone number in the email. Use a number that you've independently verified to go ahead and call the sender and make sure that it is legitimate. Again, awareness is the key. The more you know, the more you can protect, and really stay vigilant with those emails and train your agents, train your staff members to be aware, to not click links, even in emails they think are from someone that they know. And be aware with your online transactions as well, and don't use public Wi-Fi. For example, standing in line somewhere to just go ahead and pay your electric bill, or do some sort of financial transaction on your phone. Don't do it. Don't use public Wi-Fi to create those transactions, because your information can actually be swiped by hackers with very sophisticated scanning software that they can actually capture your data. And then remember that prevention isn't something you do once a week or 6 times a month, like changing the batteries in your smoke detectors. Prevention happens every day. Go back to the basics. Make sure that your operating system is updated. Make sure that your firewall software is up to date, and that you have firewall software and that you're utilizing the latest. Those are basic things that can help protect you. Use common sense. Ask yourself, does this make sense? Would this person normally send you that kind of email? Does your bank ever ask you to send them your password? Does this sound like the client you've been working with? Maybe something slightly off. And were you expecting an attachment from your colleague? Again, pick up the phone, and if something doesn't feel right, go with that feeling and say, you know what, I'm just going to verify this. Pick up the phone, send an independent email to an address that you absolutely know and trust, and verify all that information. I think really the key here with email compromise being the #1 cybercrime is be wary of every link and every attachment that shows up in an email, and verify the sender. All right, here are some resources from NAR. You can go to nar.realtor/data privacy security and find many resources, videos. There's a great cybersecurity checklist for real estate with best practices for real estate that you can implement in your offices right now. And lots of resources there for you to take a deeper dive on cybersecurity. All right, let's talk about real estate wire fraud. I'm just going to get a little bit of water here. All right, so as I mentioned, real estate, remember, is #5 in terms of cybercrime that the FBI tracks to their IC3. So in 2019, this is just real estate fraud. 11,677 victims with a total loss of $221 million across the country. But year over year, from 2018 to 2019, the victim rate only increased still it's 11,000 victims, but the victim rate increased by 3%. But look at this. The losses increased, the losses increased 48% year over year. Real estate cybercrime is on the rise, folks. It is not going anywhere. This is very popular with hackers. So here's how it works. Let's give you some background on how it works. First, the hackers will watch MLS's syndication sites like Zillow, Realtor.com, Redfin, to identify pending home sales. Once they know what the property is, they create profiles of all the parties involved: the real estate agents, the title companies, the sellers and the buyers themselves, attorneys if you have closing attorneys, using public websites and social media. The more you put on social media about your personal life, the better they can reconstruct you as an individual as a believable spoof. Just putting that out there. Then they sit back and they watch. They hack into an email account and they just watch the correspondence back and forth. Then at the appropriate time, they step in and send false wiring instructions, which is usually a last-minute change in the transaction or a last-minute change in the instructions. Then, because no one noticed it, they didn't verify, they steal the funds. It could be closing costs, it could be mortgage payoff, it could be, if the buyer's paying cash, it could be the entire amount of the purchase price. So here's an actual real estate case. So in this case, fake wiring instructions. So a hacker hacked into both the buyers and the listing agent's email accounts, created spoofed accounts that looked pretty identical. It looked like it was the correct account. So fraudulent wire instructions came from the listing agent's email account, but she said that she never sent the false wire instructions. She had, however, forwarded fake email instructions, but unbeknownst to her, she forwarded it to the buyer's spoofed account. So the buyer didn't receive the agent's forward of the false instructions. However, false instructions did hit the real buyer's real email, but it came from the listing agent's spoofed account. She couldn't really account for, why that email had been sent. But in this case, the buyer then asked, should I use these wire instructions? And the listing agent said, yes, use those wiring instructions, without double checking, without verifying that it was in fact the correct bank account. In this case, the jury found the real estate agent 85% liable for the buyer's losses and entered judgment in the amount of $167,000 against the brokerage. So that is a case where, using everything that we just talked about, verifying, calling an independently known phone number to verify those instructions, that agent was in the best position to know. The agent didn't follow up, didn't verify, and was found 85% liable. And the brokerage then had to pay out $167,000. Yikes. How many of you could support a $167,000 loss in your business? Probably not many. All right, so here are some best practices that you can use to prevent wire fraud in your business. NAR encourages all real estate licensees, but particularly you as brokers, to train your agents to know the signs of potential wire fraud and to educate your clients about these types of scams. Licensees should be knowledgeable about how to advise their clients if they believe they've been victimized by a wire fraud scam, and use these best practices. For education, NAR partnered up with the American Land Title Association to put together a mortgage closing scam informational handout, a brochure. You can download this for free at the Realtor store. Just go to the Realtor store and search for mortgage closing scam brochure. It will pop up, and it is free to download. There's a PDF, you can print it. You can brand it on the back, you know, put your own logo on the back, or a note from the broker. And use these. You can email it, you can print it and hand it out, you know, a physical copy. But use these to educate all of your buyer clients about these potential scams, so they know the red flags and they can call you and ask before they send that wire. Next, use a transaction management platform or secure email to communicate with your clients. Never send wire instructions via email, really any personal financial information, but particularly wire instructions. And educate your buyers that they will not receive wire instructions via email. And if they do, they should question it. If you do receive wire instructions by email, verify with a phone number independently obtained. Again, remember, do not reply to the email. You're probably replying to the hacker, and don't use the phone number in the email. You're probably calling the hacker, but do go ahead and verify with the title company with a phone number that you absolutely know rings through to the title company. And then finally, hold on just a minute, use those smart email practices. So what are some smart email practices? Double check the sender's email address and call the sender if you're unsure if they actually sent the email. Remember, hover your mouse over the sender's email to make sure it's from who you think it's from. Monitor your email account for any unrecognized activity. Keep your operating and antivirus systems updated. Avoid using unsecured public Wi-Fi. True story, I was sitting in the airport in Santa Barbara waiting for my flight. I signed on to my computer, used the airport Wi-Fi. For some reason, even though my email account, and this is personal, I had nothing to do with NAR, this was several years ago, my personal email account, I had to input my password. Well, guess what? Within minutes, there was, someone had gotten into my email account and started sending my contacts, some link for something. Luckily, one of my friends texted me within minutes and said, did you send this email? And I said, nope, I changed my password. I let everyone know not to click the link. It can happen that fast when you use public Wi-Fi. And of course, never click suspicious attachments. It can install, again, spyware or malware, ransomware into your computer. And again, train your staff and your agents on these practices as well. Include a wire fraud notice in your email signature so you can use this template. NAR has it available for you. Literally copy and paste it into your email provider, into your signature block, and just include this on every single email so that people will see it and they'll, hopefully try and remember it. Bernadette can tell us how many times it takes someone to see something before they actually get it as a communications professional. But just keep putting it out there, keep educating people. And then finally, use strong passwords for your email and all your online accounts. The more you can make your email account unhackable, the better. So what is a strong password? At least 8 characters, but now the cyber experts are saying 15 is better. I know that can be really hard to remember. So that's why if you use a mix of letters and numbers and even passphrases, something that's kind of easy to remember, but is so random, it could be difficult for the hacker to guess, like, swizzle razzle 88, something like that. Just something that you can remember is long. It has that mix of numbers and letters. Mix of uppercase and lowercase makes it harder to hack, as well as at least one special symbol. And then use that 2-factor identification where it's available. So you've probably, put your password into some kind of online account and it says, hey, we don't recognize you. Let us send a code to your cell phone. It can be very annoying, but they're actually doing it to protect your account. All right. The last recommended practice that we have for you is to consider an insurance policy that covers third-party financial losses. NAR members have access to this customized cyber liability program through the Realtor Member Benefits Program. You can receive discounts on your monthly premiums, higher coverage limits for phishing scams that target your clients and other cybercrime and more. You get support to quickly restore your business operations should a cyber attack or fraudulent act occur. But please remember, you can find out more about cyber policy at this website. But please remember that any cyber insurance that you have, whether it's cyber policy or through another provider, is a supplemental risk mitigation tool to be used in conjunction with all the other data security measures and risk management tools that we've talked about here today. So yes, insurance is a great thing to have. I'm sure the broker in that case where the agent was found liable for $167,000 wish that he or she had this kind of coverage that would actually pay for a client's financial losses because of a fraudulent email. So those are some recommended practices. And then here is what you do, even if you've done all of that, educated your clients about red flags, verified or tried to verify. If the worst occurs and fraud does happen, first notify the other parties, notify the seller, notify the other agent, the other broker, notify the title company, notify the bank, contact that bank immediately. Now the FBI recommends that you request a recall or a reversal, as well as a hold harmless letter or a letter of indemnity is what the FBI recommends. Then file a complaint with IC3. Simply go to ic3.gov, have your client, the victim, go to ic3.gov and complete the complaint form. Now make sure to emphasize that all the fields need to be completed for the FBI to have the best chance of recovery. And if you can have that filed between 24 and 72 hours of the actual crime, the recovery rate is better, but certainly the earlier the better. And then report the fraud to the local FBI office in your area. Now, here's what happens once that complaint is actually filed through the Internet Crime Complaint Center. It's automatically triaged and sent to a recovery asset team. Now, the recovery asset team was formed in February of 2018 to help streamline communication with financial institutions. So the IC3 analysts from the recovery team will actually intercede with the financial institution and help the FBI field office as well to recover funds. Now, since 2018, of the 1,300 incidents that were eligible for recovery team intervention, 79% of funds were recovered. This represents millions of dollars, about $304 million were able to be recovered. So please let your clients know, don't be embarrassed. Let us know that if you believe you've been a victim of fraud, follow the steps, file the complaint at IC3. And again, the earlier you can do that, the better the chance of recovery. So for real estate wire fraud, there are many resources available at NAR.realtor, NAR.realtor/wire fraud. There's a cybercrime insurance report, and the email template is also there on this page. So I'm going to take a break right now and hop over to the chat and see what questions you might have. Oops, let's go back to that one. Let me find the chat here. There we go. All right, let's see what kind of questions we have. If you have any questions on this, please go ahead. Thank you so much, Bernadette, for posting all of those links in there. Appreciate that. If you have any questions, please go ahead and type them into the chat before we move on to our next section. I'll just wait a couple minutes. If you have a question, please go ahead and type it in now.
Dan, while we're waiting for anyone to type their questions in, can you just give a brief example of what a what ransomware or what a ransom situation would be?
Yeah, so ransomware is where a hacker actually infiltrates your computer system and then basically holds all of your data for ransom, just like the name implies. So in that scenario, you'll receive an email or some kind of communication saying, hey, we have all of your data. If you pay this amount, we will release your data back to you. So many companies, so the new wrinkle on this is many companies have been listening to the cybersecurity experts out there and creating backups. So your IT professional probably has a backup of your system and all of your data somewhere, hopefully on site and off site, you know, a few copies. So talk to your IT professional about those backups. What companies have been doing is saying, hey, you know, ransomware attacker, we have a backup, we'll be fine. You know, it's business as usual for us. So now the thing is, now they're holding it for ransom against publishing the information online. So there was an example of an entertainment law firm in Hollywood. They had some pretty big clients, some names that you would definitely recognize from, you know, Hollywood elite. And the hackers had all of these people's, you know, these Hollywood stars' informations, their contracts, their personal financial details. And, you know, this law firm said, you know what, we have a backup, we'll be fine. The hacker said, no, we're going to publish all of your stuff online. So I believe in that case, the law firm did go ahead and pay the ransom to prevent their clients' details from being, you know, spilled on the internet. But that's an example of ransomware. It does happen. So I managed NAR's association insurance program. And I think last year we had 2 or 3 associations around the country that were hit with ransomware attacks. And the NAR insurance program, and if you have, you know, cyber insurance, check your insurance policy for the steps you need to take if you are a victim of a ransomware attack. Typically, an insurance policy, depending on the terms, may provide a forensic analyst to go in and see what's happening. Some insurance companies will actually pay the ransom for you. So definitely check your cyber policy, your cyber insurance coverage for whatever ransom coverage that you might have. Oh, you're muted, Bernadette. Oh, there you are.
Great, thanks so much. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so
okay,
we can move on to the next section.
Okay, sounds great. Let me just get this moved over there. There we go. All right. Let's move on to ADA website accessibility. So as I mentioned in the beginning, ADA website accessibility has been something NAR has been talking about for several years now, but it's really gained more attention in the last few months in the real estate industry. So you may know, and if you're not, I'm giving you some news, dozens, if not hundreds of brokerages in Florida have received cease and desist demand letters from a plaintiff's law firm claiming that the brokerage's website is not ADA compliant and threatening that if the broker does not settle, i.e. extortion, for some small amount, that they would file a lawsuit under the Fair Housing Act. Now, this is a really unique situation. NAR's legal team has done a review. The Florida Realtors team, legal team has done a review, and it doesn't seem like it would hold water in court. But nonetheless, this is happening. You know, brokers are very concerned about their websites and whether they're ADA compliant. We understand this is now spread to Massachusetts and may spread across the country if this law firm continues at its current pace. So ADA website accessibility is definitely an issue for brokerages to be concerned about. So here's the real issue. Is a website or mobile application a place of public accommodation that must comply with the American Disabilities Act? So the ADA's requirement that physical spaces be made accessible is clear and undisputed. Over time, the question has arisen whether those accessibility requirements extend to websites, and it's become a very pressing issue. Now, the ADA was enacted back in 1990, and at that point, the internet existed, but it didn't have the place in mainstream everyday society that it has today. So the ADA, the language of the American Disabilities Act makes no mention of the internet or its application to electronic spaces. But with more and more business being conducted on the internet, including home buyers and sellers looking for information, the ADA's application to the internet has become a major issue in today's world. And much of the direction on ADA's applicability to websites has come from the courts. Now, the Department of Justice, which is the arm of the government that is responsible for oversight of the American with Disabilities Act, has long taken the broad position that ADA requires all websites to be accessible. However, the Department of Justice has not actually established a rule, which one would think they would do. And in fact, rulemaking on this has not only been stalled, but it's been deprioritized at the Department of Justice, leaving plaintiffs to really lead the way on this and bring it to the courts. So what do the courts say? So there's kind of a split among the circuits. So the 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 11th Circuit courts say that a website has to have a nexus or a connection to a physical location in order for the ADA to be applied. So in other words, if you have both a bricks and mortar location and a website, then in those circuits, your website also has to be ADA compliant. However, the 1st, 2nd, and 7th Circuit, including Connecticut, states that it doesn't matter if you have a bricks and mortar location at all. If you have a website or some kind of electronic space, there's no connection needed. So in other words, your website still needs to be ADA compliant, whether or not you have a bricks and mortar location. Now, the reality is the Department of Justice is not moving forward, but plaintiffs are. From 2017 to 2018, we saw a 177% increase in the number of ADA website accessibilities case filed. And in fact, 20% of all ADA cases that were filed last year related to website accessibility. So again, like cybercrime and real estate wire fraud, this isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So 2 cases I want to bring up today were both decided last year and give us a glimpse into how courts are now looking at ADA website accessibility. So in the Robles versus Domino's Pizza case, in this case, a visually impaired plaintiff alleged that Domino's website and mobile app were not accessible to him as a blind person. Originally, the district court, the lower court, dismissed the action because the Department of Justice had not yet provided specific guidance. Essentially, the business, Domino's, said, look, we don't know what an ADA accessible website means. Therefore, there's no standard to hold us against. How can you say that our website is not ADA accessible? Well, the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals said that there is existing guidance that already articulates those standards and requires websites to be full and equally accessible to individuals with disabilities. The court looked at the WCAG 2.0 standards. Now it's 2.1, but the WCAG standards, which has basically been adopted by the Department of Justice and the federal government in terms of its agency websites. So the court said, look, this is the federal government saying this is the standard we're using. It makes sense that that would be the standard for ADA compliance for websites. So the standard is WCAG, which I have it in a couple more screens, and I'll tell you exactly what that means. Your IT professional absolutely knows what it means. The second case is the Diaz versus Kroger case. Now, this case was in New York State, and the court looked at 2 things. First, they looked at jurisdiction, found they had no jurisdiction over Kroger because Kroger is based in Ohio. They have no stores in New York. There's no way anyone in New York could buy anything online from Kroger. So they said they didn't have personal jurisdiction. But the bigger point to make with the Kroger case is this idea of mootness. So moot means it's no longer an issue. And in this case, the court looked at Kroger, who's IT professional, basically said that the company had already looked at ADA compliance before the lawsuit was filed. They had started, adapting those WCAG standards before the lawsuit was filed. The website, as it stood, at that point in time, was compliant with those WCAG standards. And when the lawsuit was received, the IT department went in and looked at the specific barriers that the lawsuit mentioned, fixed those right away, so that there are no barriers to access as alleged in the complaint. And it's still that way today at the time that he was making this affidavit, and that the company had no intention of undoing those changes or regressing to any sort of non-compliance, and that the store was committed to keeping its website up to date and compliant. And the court looked at this and said, this is beyond anything we've seen when we've held a case to be moot as against a defendant. They've gone above and beyond here. So those standards, again, are they had a plan, they were working on their plan, and had the website compliant as far as they knew. They addressed the specific issues in the complaint immediately, and those were no longer issues, and they had no intention of rolling back their compliance, and in fact, compliance was a priority for them. The court looked at this and said, you know, with all of these things the company's doing, they threw out the lawsuit. It's now moot. So that is a good thing to keep in mind as we go through these accessibility guidelines. So right now we're looking at WCAG 2.1 guidelines, and those will have the Website Accessibility Initiative of the World Wide Web Consortium is the main rule setting or international standards organization for the internet. WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility. Web Content Accessibility. And this is a set of technical standards and specifications that can be integrated into a website to make it accessible. So accessible content will interact and adapt with assistive technology, which makes content easier to consume by persons with disabilities. And there are three main areas for a website to be compliant with WCAG 2.1. That is the adaptive and assistive technology, so that a screen reader, for example, can read the website and interpret it for someone who is visually impaired. The content should be navigable in different ways. In other words, not just with a mouse, but with keys on the computer. And the content should be presented in a multiple of different ways without losing information or structure. An example of this would be, you may see a photograph or something on a website or even in a PDF that explains what's in the image. So for example, it could say, you know, the photo depicts, you know, a child in a green field holding a baseball bat, and, you know, it's a sunny day, something of that nature that will actually describe the image so that someone who can't see the image would understand that there's an image on that page and here's what it is. So here are some best practices for ADA website accessibility. First of all, do not wait for Department of Justice guidance. That is no longer really a valid argument in the courts, and DOJ guidance is more than likely not forthcoming. First thing, talk to your website provider. Take steps now to create and maintain an accessible website. Talk to your website provider, find out what their accessibility standards are. Remember, we're looking for WCAG 2.1 standards, and look at your contracts for indemnification provisions so that if you are sued for ADA compliance, whether or not the website provider would step in and defend that claim for you. Next, conduct an accessibility audit and create a plan to address any deficiencies. And with that audit, you can consult a website accessibility expert to look at your site and create a plan for addressing it. There are even some free websites that will scan your site and come up with, you know, a list of deficiencies and how to correct them. Your plan does not need to be done all at once, but having a plan is important. So try to start with things that will make the biggest impact on accessibility. And again, talk to your website provider about how you can implement that plan. Again, follow those WCAG 2.0 guidelines and include an accessibility policy on your website. This is something you can do literally today. You can go to NAR's website, nar.realtor/accessibility, That's our accessibility notice page. Literally copy that and paste it onto a page in your website. You can, again, start implementing your plan, but start with this accessibility notice today. What this accessibility notice does is it provides people with a name and contact information to contact someone if they're at your brokerage, if they're having trouble with your website and understanding your website. I have one more link to add, which is to NAR's ADA topic page. I'll add that to the chat. If you go there, you can find videos that explain ADA website accessibility, as well as other resources to help you in that conversation with your website provider to talk about getting your website compliant. Again, start with an audit, create a plan, and implement that plan to create an ADA website compliant website. All right, let me pause here. I'll pop over to the chat and see what's happening in the chat, see if there's any questions on this. There is that other link that you can go where there are many resources, including videos about ADA website accessibility. Does anyone have any questions about the ADA website? If you provide a blurb, thank you for your question, George. If you provide a blurb with a link on your site to an ADA accessible site if necessary, would that cover you? For example, if you're vision impaired, please click here. So the ADA accessibility notice that is up on the screen right now, that is a step. That is a first step in website accessibility. However, the courts will be looking to see if your site complies with those WCAG standards. So I would say that's not quite enough. It may be enough in the beginning while you're doing your audit and creating your plan, but definitely with an eye towards getting your website to the WCAG 2.1 compliant point, working with your website vendor. Any other questions on ADA website compliance? All right. Looks like that is it. Bernadette, do you see any other questions?
I don't see anything, any other questions popping up.
All right. Well, that is what I have for you today. Again, thank you so much for inviting NAR Legal Affairs. This broker web series sounds like a fantastic opportunities for brokers in your area to learn more. And I'm sure Dr. Lautz will have an incredible presentation for you.
Thank you so much, Deanne. This was great. We love having you with us.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care.
Bye, Deanne.